Cool. So, hey everyone. Today I'll be presenting to you on the topic of an SMS generator. We're going to be showing you how to build an SMS generator that leverages short URLs, and we're going to be using Azure Functions, Azure Storage, and Azure Communication Services to do this. This presentation is by myself as well as Frank, who couldn't be here due to some issues. So I'm David. I am a product manager on the Azure Communication Services team, and I'm excited to walk you through this topic. So what is the problem that we're trying to solve to start with? So you might imagine in different types of customer engagement scenarios where you might need to send a URL out to your customers, either through SMS, email, or through some type of other channel. URLs sometimes look like what we have on the left. We have a bunch of query parameters. We have a bunch of information that's all getting trickled in, and we need to be able to send it in less than 160 characters through SMS. And so what we're going to be showing you today is how do you use the power of Azure to build out your own URL shortener, as well as how do you integrate it with Azure Communication Services to send that SMS. So before we get too deep in, I want to show you kind of what I'm talking about. And so what I'll do here is I have a running endpoint already with our URL shortener hooked up to our Azure Communication Services. And so what I'm going to do is just quickly send myself a text message with a short URL. And so here I'm going to send myself a URL that's it's not as long as the one I showed you, but it's somewhat long. And I'm going to go ahead and send it to myself on my phone. And so I'm going to just through Postman hit send. And what we'll see on my phone in just a second is that the SMS comes in with a short URL on it. If I click on the short URL, you can see it takes me into that page that we just encrypted. And so and this page is actually a tutorial that I will be sharing with all of you who want to follow along by yourselves and perform the same exercise that we're doing today. So before I show you how to build that, let's go and I'll take you through a bit of the architecture that we're using. So we're using a couple of different components to build this type of experience. First off, we have an application that's running in .NET using our Azure Functions that becomes our endpoint, where we are able to hit it to be able to trigger that the shortening of the URL as well as the sending of that URL. We then have a URL shortener that we're going to be sharing with all of you that runs on Azure using Azure Functions and Azure Storage. It allows us to shorten the URLs. It helps us keep track of clicks on those URLs and makes sure that we have something that's scalable, cheap, and easy to run on Azure to perform the URL shortening task. And then finally, we have Azure Communication Services, where we are using our SMS service to push through SMSs into our customers' phones. So let's take a look at how all of this comes together. Let's get out of the PowerPoint and let's start showing you some stuff. So the first step that I wanted to take is just give you a bit of an overview of what Azure Communication Services is, as not everyone might be familiar with it. So Azure Communication Services is a managed communications platform. It sits on top of the same infrastructure that powers products like Skype and Teams. And we leverage a number of different channels that we provide, all the way from chat, email, phone calling, voice and video, and SMS. Today, we'll be focusing most of our time on SMS, but if you're interested in any of these other channels, be sure to take a look. And what we're going to do to get us started is that we're going to create an Azure Communication Services resource on Azure. I've pre-generated one that we're going to be using for the demo, but I will show you sort of how it's done. So pretty straightforward. We provided a subscription, a resource group, a resource name, and we're able to review and create that resource. And once we actually have the resource created, and as I mentioned, I already have one here, you get a resource that enables you to access all those different primitives that we just talked about. And specifically for SMS, which is what we're going to be using today, we provide you the ability to purchase phone numbers through Azure Communication Services. These phone numbers allow you to be able to both make phone calls as well as send and receive SMS through them. And we're going to be using a phone number today as part of our demo so that we can actually send texts to a phone number. The other part of our demo that we're going to be focusing on today is the actual URL shortening itself. And so for that URL shortening, we are going to be leveraging a sample, open source, available to everyone, that enables you to quickly deployed that in that architecture that I just described, of having that Azure Function and Azure Storage working together to help you shorten URLs. This sample, as I mentioned, is fully open source, so it's available to everyone, and it's now officially a part of the Microsoft open source program. So we're very excited about that. This sample is as easy to use as a one-click deploy. So when you do a one-click deploy, you're able to go directly into Azure and start the deployment process for the sample. Looks like we just hit a small error there. So once you go through that one-click deploy, you're able to have the sample running on your Azure on your Azure subscription. Once it's running, the sample actually provides multiple different endpoints that you're able to leverage, and it enables you to be able to not only create URLs, manage them, and do other things with them. We also provide an entire UI on top of it so that you can manage the URLs manually as well, as if you want it. And so now that we've kind of introduced all of the different pieces that are coming together for the demo, we're now gonna actually jump over to showing you how it's built. And so for this, we're gonna throw away the PowerPoint completely, and I'll quickly just mention that, just give a shout out to the tutorial that we'll be providing. So everything that we're covering today is available to you on learn.microsoft.com. There is a link on the chat as well as on all of the slides that you can access to get access to this tutorial, and so that you can follow along yourself if you wanna do that. And throughout the presentation, I'm gonna be leveraging this tutorial to help us along. So let's jump over to the code. So to start with, what I have here is that I've set up an Azure function in .NET. I've done it using the Azure extension directly on Visual Studio Code, where I'm able to create an Azure function very easily. And so here I just have the kind of the vanilla Azure function that gets created, which we're going to be extending as part of this demo. And the first thing that we're going to be doing as part of this demo is that we're going to be making changes to our local settings.json file. I'm not going to open mine because I've actually already gone through and gotten my connection strings and whatnot added. But generally, the idea is to add into that local.settings.json file a couple of environmental variables that we're going to be uploading as part of our Azure functions. Things like our connection string for Azure Communication Services, the phone number that we're going to be using, as well as the URL to that URL shortener that we deployed earlier. Once I've done that, I can now start to build up my function itself. And we're going to start by adding a couple of query parameters that we're going to be parsing out of the request. And so in order to send that SMS to the right person and to actually shorten a URL, we're going to be adding two query parameters, one for the phone number that we want to send the message to, and one for the URL that we want to shorten. Once we've added those two query parameters, we're now going to focus on the exciting part of it, which is we're going to now shorten that URL, and then we're going to send a text message with it. We're going to start by shortening the URL. And what we're going to do is I'm going to add some additional imports here to help us with the post request that we're going to be making to our Azure function for the URL shortener, and as well as some JSON helpers so that we can actually parse it out. In order to parse out the response that we receive from that URL shortener, I'm also going to add a class that we're going to be using to deserialize it in just a second. So now we start with the process of getting that URL shortened. And so we have an endpoint that we can use to get the URL shortened. And what we're going to do is that we're going to hit that, and that URL that endpoint is actually what we've already configured as part of our local settings.json. And so I will start by configuring our HTTP client right here. With our HTTP client, we're going to be sending some request data with the URL that we want to shorten. And then we're going to be making the post request and deserializing the response back. So we're going to do that right here. So we serialize the request data that we're sending. We go ahead and we send it, and then then we go ahead and we send it, and then we read what comes back. Something that the little error I'm getting there is one thing I forgot to do, which is super important, which is to declare our environmental variable. So as I mentioned, we need to get that environmental variable that we declared on the local settings.json file. And so now that I've declared this, we now have the URL for us to make the request to. So with those couple lines of code, we're now parsing out the information out of the request. We're serializing the request data that we're going to send to the URL shortener sample that we have running. That will shorten our URL and send it back, and we're going to deserialize that using the class that we had added just above right here. So let's go ahead now and go to the next section, which is for me the most fun part, which is like we get to send the SMS to customers. So the first thing that we need to do is we actually need to add the package that we're going to be using. And so we need to add the Azure.communication.sms package. And I've already done this, so it'll probably tell me that that's already existing in my environment. But just as easy, we can add the package in, which we will need. And the next step is to update some of our imports so that we actually are able to use that package. So I'm going to add in our Azure.communications.sms import. Next, we're now ready to get started with sending it. And the way that Azure Communication Services SMS works is that we need to initiate an SMS client. That SMS client requires a connection string to get started. So we're gonna go ahead and leverage those environmental variables that we had already declared, our Azure Communication Services connection string and the phone number for it, and we're gonna initialize our SMS client directly. We're then gonna go ahead and use that SMS client to send out the SMS directly, and we're gonna be using the send method to do that. We're going to be populating that send method with a phone number. So the phone number that we're sending from, that is the Azure Communication Services procured phone number. And then the phone number that we're sending to, which is the number that we've parsed out of the query parameters. And then we're just embedding a very simple message here. And just to kind of prove out that like this is real, I will add a timestamp to it. So it's 1:46 here. There was no way I would know what time I was getting to this, so we'll add a 1:46 so you know it's true that we're doing this live. We're then finally just going to go ahead and pass back the response that we get so that we know whether the SMS was successfully sent or not, and we're done. We've actually configured the Azure function to do what we wanted. So the next step is that we're going to go ahead and run it. And once it's running, we will test out that same demo we did at the beginning to make sure that it's working and that we're getting that SMS. So what we'll have here in a second is we'll build our Azure function and we'll have it running locally so that we can test it out. One important thing that I'll mention as we're waiting for this to happen is that URLs are tricky to work with within SMS environments because SMS carriers tend to want to block URLs to limit spam. And so one of the things that Azure Communication Services provides you out of the box is the ability for you to verify those phone numbers. It is an additional extra step that takes a couple days to go through to get the initial verification, as well as then a couple weeks to get the full verification. But it's important to do not only for your customers so that they can receive your communications, but it's really important for you because by doing that verification, you will unlock additional thresholds to be able to send more SMSs, as well as unlock things like sending URLs, which can be very important in certain scenarios like this. So you can see that now we have things running. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to Postman, and I have here ready a call. So we're going to be calling a local host. We're going to be texting the number again, and we're going to be sending that same URL that we had before. We're going to go ahead and send. Let's go in my phone to see. Okay, looks like it's just coming in right now. And so let's go over to the phone, and you can see that 146 number is right there. If I click the URL, we get taken again to that site that you'll have access to. So great. It looks like things are working. So So yeah, in conclusion, so this is with Azure Communication Services as well as the Azure URL shortener that we showcased, you're able to very easily put together these types of experiences to help augment your customer engagement interactions. As always, you can always take these types of Azure functions and deploy them out to Azure. There's very great documentation from the Azure Functions team on doing that. And if you are curious on what to do next or trying it out, please visit aka.ms/SMS short URL to learn more. And I'm excited to answer any questions that you might have on the chat now. Thank you.
Thanks, David. So we have a couple questions here, especially just around the cost of it. So we'll start with here. I think in the chat we linked the full scale, like what the costs are and things like that. But if we want to talk about that just for a second, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So Azure Communication Services is completely consumption based. So you only pay for what you use. I can quickly just navigate into some of the pricing documentation we have. So for each of the primitives, we have different pricings. But for example, for SMS, you pay you pay a monthly fee for the actual phone number, but then for the actual text messages that you're sending, you're paying by message. So it's fully consumption based, depending on the geo that you're sending in.
Is there a limited quota for the free services? So like, is there a certain number of SMS messages that can be sent for free before you get charged?
Is that question related to like using free Azure credits? Is the question?
I believe so.
That is a good question. I might need to double check on that. I believe that we have some limitations in terms of phone number acquisition with free subscriptions. There's some carrier-related limitations that we have there. But when it comes to the sending, I believe that you're able to leverage those credits for it.
Cool. The last question we have here is, can Azure Communication Services be used without purchasing a phone number?
No. Well, depends. Sorry. So when it comes to SMS, you do need to purchase a phone number in order to leverage it. But when it comes to our other primitives, like if you wanted to do like voice and video, like through VoIP, or if you want to do email or chat, that does not require a phone number. So you can get up and running with things like email, chat, and voice and video calling without needing to purchase any phone number. We do require a phone number when it comes to SMS, for example, where we need to have a phone number to send from, as well as our telephony offering. So if you wanted to call call phones to their actual number, then we do require a phone number to do that.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, David. It was great having you here today.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Haley. And I will. I saw there was a couple other questions, so I'll answer those in the chat later. But thank you very much for everyone for those questions.
We actually do have time, so we can pull these up right now. Sure.
Let's go through some additional ones.
Yep. So what does a program look like this look in action? What does it look like for a client?
So in action, what this looks like is you're able to like, for example, some of the very common scenarios that we see from customers are things like appointment reminders, for example. So in action, you would have some type of service that might be generating appointment reminders, or like ETAs. Like imagine your DoorDash, you need to send ETAs to your customers, or like tracking links. So you would have some type of service that's generating those links. And then you would be able to pass those links through a URL shortener like what we just showed to then be able to package them and send them through SMS. So there's definitely like an added component that is really more scenario specific that would come into play, depending on what information is it that you want to send. And that's why the way that we've packaged kind of the solution today is that it's an endpoint, so that you could call that endpoint from another service that's dealing with like appointment reminders again, and like have that service call this one to help with the shortening of the URL and then sending it out to the right customer.
I've seen the answer to this question in chat, but I think it's always just good to mention and pull this one up here. What about international numbers?
So we do have support today for some for different geos. We are continuing our geo expansion as we speak, and so there will be more announcements coming soon. And so as we expand geos, we will be adding additional country support. So today we do have some limitations there in terms of what countries we're supporting, but additional support is being added pretty consistently. So we'll be excited to share more information with you very soon. If there's any specific countries that you're interested in, drop them in the chat. We would love to know what everyone's thinking about and what countries would you like support for.
Cool. Where can we figure out which countries are supported right now?
So in this same documentation that I have here, you can find some of the country support. I believe we even have some documentation that's specific to the country eligibility, and so I will try to get it added or show it here. But if one of my coworkers who is in the chat actually has the link and drops it, that would be even better. But I'll try to kind of just look for the number for the specific documentation. I believe it might be right here, where we have some of the restrictions. Yeah.
Awesome. Very helpful.
Cool.
And as we wrap up, we have another question. Can a purchased phone number be used for call forwarding if a user tries to call it or reply to the SMS?
That's a really good question. So we do have, we've recently public previewed a new service within Azure Communication Services that we call Call Automation, that enables you to do call forwarding. So you're able to receive phone calls and be able to forward them to any other number that you prefer. On the SMS side, you do have the ability to receive SMSs and be able to it's pretty open. You can do whatever you want with that SMS and decide where you're forwarding it to. We don't for SMS, I believe we don't have like a built-in forwarding system. So it would be, you would have to add a bit of that glue between them to make that happen.
We keep having such great questions come in. Every time I think we're done with the session, we get another great question. We'll just keep rolling until we're at time here. How do I ensure deliverability of SMS to my customers? URLs can sometimes get blocked.
That is an excellent question. Thank you. Thank you for asking it. So one thing that I briefly touched on, but I'll maybe spend like a couple minutes on it because I think it's really important. I'll kind of navigate to the doc where we talk about this. Is when we talk about toll-free verification. So the key to deliverability is verification. So ensuring that the carriers know that the phone number that you're using is real and it's being used for business purposes rather than to spam or cause issues for customers. And so that's why before even getting started with like building something like this, it's really key to start with verification as one of the first steps. Ensure that the phone number that you're using is already either in a pending verification stage or fully verified, so that carriers know that the traffic that's going to get sent through that phone number is valid, that it's business oriented, and that you're providing your customers with the right tools to be able to do things like unsubscribe or stop messages, which are part of the requirements that we require for verification. And so this is really kind of the key to it. If you want if you want high deliverability and you want URLs to not get blocked, this is what we recommend doing. And it's even though it might seem like an extra step that you need to go through, it's really a benefit to your business, making sure that you're not going to get those blocked SMSs and losing business because of it.
Mm-hmm. Regarding sending mails using Azure Communication Services, how would it be different from MS Graph or Exchange API?
So the Azure Communication Services email service is agnostic. So you're able to do things like use Azure managed domains or even bring your own custom domain. It is fully consumption based. It also allows for higher limits, so you can do like bulk email sends. So it's definitely more targeted towards marketing and notification scenarios, where you're sending maybe emails to hundreds of thousands, even millions of people at the same time, and you need like high deliverability, scale. So that's really the differentiator versus some of those other services that Microsoft also offers.
And the final question we'll answer before moving on here is, would this be considered a microservice?
The solution we built, yes, I guess so. Yes, it is running in its own microservice within an Azure function, so it does allow you to be able to. It would be part of kind of a microservice architecture. Yes.
Awesome. Thanks so much, David.
Thank you very much for having me, Haley. Have a great rest of your day, everyone else, and we'll see you soon.